Ba-da-ba-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. And Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101.
I'm Lucy Dickens from ITB and I'm on Promoter 101.
So you want to talk showbiz? Well, step right up because the Promoter 101 podcast is about to begin.
That's right. Step on up. The soapbox is yours because today, episode 171 of the Promoter 101 podcast has some amazing interviews ahead, including Triple Eight's George Couri, back continuing the Nashville sessions down here in Music City, Tennessee, Dan.
Plus 3 questions with, like this, Jim Frayling.
Episode 171 of Promoter 101 starts right now.
Hi, this is Jason Kupperman from Paradigm, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
Well, this is it, folks. We've gotten to the reissue of the week. You know you can find it at promoter101.com and wherever you listen to the podcast. This one is the big one. It is our 100th episode All-Star Spectacular.
Dan, there's too many names for me to mention, but I'm going to try to do it like one of those.
Let Connor do it. Let Connor do it. He's so good at it.
Do it. Go for it.
Oh, I fucking got this. We've got Golden Voices Elliot Lefko, ICM Partners Rick Farrell, FBC Live Scott Leslie, Vectors Ross Schillings, Amplify Billboards Dave Brooks, Live Nation's Joey Scolari, Lights Ant Taylor, The Supermensch Shep Gordon, AGI's Nick Storch, DZP's Danny Zalesko, ICM Partners Andrea Johnson, APA's Andy Summers, Niederlander Concerts Jamie Loeb, MGM Resorts Sid Greenfeig, Entourage Talents Wayne Forte, Live Nation's Leslie Olenek, APA's Steve Martin, Red Lights Stuart Ross, NS2's Darren Lashinsky, Rocks Off's Jake Zufnarowski, Atlantic Records Harlan Fry, Icon Tom Ross, the Brooklyn Bulls Peter Shapiro, AEG's Max Adler, APA's Craig Newman, Live Nation's Jason Miller, Vectors Brian Panix, IMP's Seth Hurwitz, and Ticketfly's Andrew Dreskin.
Plus, we've got special guests from AEG, Toby Leighton Pope, Paradigm's Jason Kupperman, Live Nation's Mary Claire Bergelli, UTA's Lance Roberts, Emporium Presents Jason Zink, Symbola's Ollie Rosenblatt, CAA's Brian Hill, New Frontiers Paul Lohr, Paradigm's Brian Swanson, AC's Ten Heineck, Ticketmaster's Jared Smith, and William Morrison Deffer's Jay Williams.
Gentlemen, well done. Dropping some of the biggest names in the industry. That 100th episode of Promoter 101. One of the best, I think. Check it out. It's available at promoter101.net.
Promoter 101 Podcast.
With Steiny and the Pierce. News of the week.
Luke, what's the news going around the music industry?
It's time for News of the Week. On Monday, Live Nation announced that former Opry and Ryman honcho Sally Williams had joined the company as president of Nashville Music and Business Strategy. Sally had spent more than 2 decades at the Ryman Hospitality Group, which is home to the Ryman Auditorium and the Opry House in Music City, Tennessee. She has served as a board member and chair of the Country Music Association, and Williams' final date at the Ryman will be August 9th. She'll start Live Nation in September, reporting to President of U.S. Concerts, Bob Rue. More shakeups happening this week in Music City, this time happening today in publishing. Sony ATV Nashville has announced that industry veteran, partner, and general manager of the publishing outfit This Music, Mr. Rusty Gaston, will take the helm at Sony ATV Nashville. Gaston is a staple in the Nashville publishing community and takes up the space formerly occupied by Troy Tomlinson, who left Sony ATV earlier this month to join Universal Music Publishing Nashville as its CEO. And all of this follows the larger reorganization of Sony Music Group to combine the recorded and music business publishing interests into a single entity under the direction of CEO and chairman Rob Stringer. Finally, the sale talks of Universal Music Group are heating up again as UMG reported its first half financial results as part of Vivendi's reporting. Universal generated $1.77 billion from streaming in the 6-month period between January and June of this year, which is a jump of 32% from the first half of the year 2018. The firm's overall recorded music revenues hit a record $2.93 billion, up 22%. And importantly, UMG's overall first half EBITDA climbed 43.6% to $543 million. Universal's biggest money-generating artists, a very interesting part of the report in the 6 months, were Billie Eilish, Ariana Grande, The Star is Born soundtrack, King and Prince, and Back Number. That'll do it for News of the Week.
Yo, this is Tommy Lee. Yeah, that T-Lead. And you're listening to Promoter 101. Fucking turn this shit up, bitches.
Kicking things off on the 171st episode of Promoter 101, we're going to start out with 3 questions from Like This, Jim's Frayling.
It's time for 3 questions. Joining us over the pond, Jim Fraley, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be on.
Time changes and everything. Somehow we made this work. What's your question for us today, Jim?
So I was with a friend recently at the Great Escape in Brighton, and she's fulfilled a real ambition of hers in getting a show on at the O2. And it was something I was often aware of when I worked at Wembley, that was some people's ambition fulfilled. I'd like to ask you guys, when will you be done? What is it that you fulfilled all your ambitions?
Well, as far as being a concert promoter, I think, stadium shows has always been kind of the hopes. As far as the podcast, I don't know. I mean, the first time somebody actually listened, I think we fulfilled our ambition. I don't think that was ever something we were expecting. So
you're too modest, Dan. You're too modest.
No, the idea of getting to a second listener or being invited to a first conference, let alone being invited back to some of the conferences to do keynotes, like as far as the podcast goes, it's like just start it and see what happens, and hopefully our parents will listen. I don't think any of us really ever expected this. So what's your next question?
Okay. We always said we're 2 nations divided by a common language. And I certainly found that, working with the NFL and American promoters for years, always found there were just lots of little differences. And I've adjusted to most of them over time, but there's a few I just can't get my head around. And I wonder, when you travel to the UK, and I do love the London sessions that you guys do, what is the one thing that you just cannot get used to when you come to the UK?
It's not really a culture thing. It's more of just a technicality. The power always tends to mess with me for the first 3 or 4 minutes that I'm there. And you got to remember, when you're traveling with the podcast, it's like not only am I carrying my laptop to work and my phone chargers and what have you, but the podcast is a lot of production. So to get set up and completely realign on a traveling setup studio and get power like locked in. I know it's a transformer, and we carry a bunch of them now. And over the years, we've really figured it out. But like, it always fucks with me. But otherwise, I mean, I think London and New York are very similar cities. But you change the accents out, and the politics and the pace of those cities are pretty interchangeable. I love the UK. It is my favorite place to travel. There's no question. And if I can get it in more than once in a year, I always jump at that. So many friends over there. It's just such a great experience. The industry runs a little differently, but it's becoming more conjoint as we're seeing the conglomerations of all the agencies. Not just on the agency sides, but AEG and Live Nation are deep into both sides. So you're definitely seeing a uniformed attitude on how the buying and the selling all tend to work. And I think that's a good thing, because the acts have this universal way of playing their show, and they want to, on an album cycle, they want to bring out that vibe of, this is the show that we've built. Not, this is the UK show we've built and this is the US show we've built. And in some cases, some artists are going to be much bigger in one country versus another, where maybe they're doing theaters in the UK while they're doing arenas and stadiums in the States, or vice versa.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen globally on the same rate. So sometimes it has to be a different show just because it has to scale differently based on demand. But in general, the artist has a view on how they want to present that tour. And I think global touring, and with boots on the ground with companies like Live Nation and AEG and William Morris and CAA and ICM and Paradigm all being able to play in both sides, it makes it a whole lot easier to have a bridged gap of, this is how we're presenting the artist globally.
I think the international standards are really important. I always culturally felt that the UK industry, and I might be being naive here, and that there might be people that vehemently disagree, but the one thing I always thought was slightly different, although I think this has been changed in recent times and will change more with MSG coming over here, I always felt that the UK was slightly less feral in terms of competitive terms. Not that people didn't want to do much better than their rivals, but ultimately there came a point where people put their differences aside, and you would have a situation where Live Nation has consistently been the biggest partner to go to at an AEG venue. So I always felt that was a little bit more sensible than what happened in America. But I wonder, I think the O2 got dragged into that kind of booking war between LA and New York a little bit in terms of the two companies saying, well, you can play this one, but you can't play that one. And I think the O2 in London got dragged into that somewhat. I think that's going to change with MSG building a huge arena a matter of miles away from the O2. And I think that'll be something really interesting to watch.
Well, clearly that's opinion, not fact, and who knows how AEG made those decisions. And actually, it wasn't really Live Nation. It was more MSG, AEG facilities in that argument. I think Live Nation was kind of a bystander for the most part. It was Sharon that sued him, right? So she's from your part of the world.
True. That's very true. Yeah. Okay. Fair point. I have one more question for you guys, if that's okay. What have you found different since you got involved with Live Nation? Have any agents, for example, treated you differently? Have there been upsides or downsides?
I don't think so. I mean, what we found was by the time that we built our company to the point where Live Nation wanted to acquire us, we had already built a pretty good reputation. We've never not paid a band. We've never not played out a show unless, it was an artist canceling for health or, conflict of whatever. But, we've never pulled a show based on whatever. We've never walked from a show. We were already doing 500 shows a year without Live Nation. So it didn't really change our scope. It wasn't like somebody was saying, okay, now we'll sell you. It's just people that we were doing business with, we're still doing business with. It wasn't like anyone was like, oh, finally your credit's good enough for us. We're already working with everybody. It's just a matter of, okay, our accounting's different now, but we have more resources, but we're still doing what we're doing. We're just doing more of it. And we've got, some other partners now and, some additional experience in our corner. Some really nice experience when I'm like, okay, I've never seen this before. And I can call Mark Campana and be like, dude, what the fuck do I do with this? And he's like, all right, let me school you, kid. It's nice to have that resource.
I think it's a sign of a mature organization that just lets people be people. Do you know what I mean? Thank you for being upfront about it. It's good to have the opportunity just to ask someone who's going through something. And I appreciate the opportunity.
I appreciate the questions. And thank you so much for playing 3 questions with us.
It's been a blast. Thank you very much.
If you want to play 3 questions, email us and say, hey, I got some stuff I just want to ask you guys. How do you do that, Luke?
Well, Dan, you can send us an email. Hit us at steiny@promoter101.net. Let us know what 3 questions you're dying to ask.
Alex Viscasil, Live Nation Canada, and I'm on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101 Flashbacks.
Episode 78.
Michael Chugg.
Oh, we can reproduce the big production shows. I mean, we're up to date with all the modern sound and lights and equipment. Back in the 70s and the early 80s, those big shows like Fleetwood Mac and ABBA and people like that would bring most of the show. But it's all there. I mean, we've been doing Robbie Williams since 2000 and a few tours. He's bought tons and tons and trucks and everything, loads of stuff. But on the last tour, it was quite minimal. They just bring the set, really, these days.
Do they boat it in?
Some boat it in, some fly it in. I mean, the sets these days are not made out of steel and wood. They're made out of cardboard and paper and styrofoam and all that stuff.
It travels much easier.
Yeah. I mean, you're still, like on a Robbie Williams, you're talking a 14, 15 truck tour. So it's still a very substantial size tour. And obviously, we have much bigger trucks in Australia. So a 25 truck tour of America will usually fit into probably 15 of our trucks.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's a whole different demographic. Okay.
Yeah, and we used, for instance, you fly in, you start in Perth. We have to bring some of the equipment across from the East Coast. Then we truck it back to Adelaide, comfortably 2 days, set up, play Adelaide, comfortably a day, you go to Melbourne, play Melbourne. Then a day off or so, you go and do Sydney, or you might take 2 days and go to Brisbane, then come back to Sydney. And then you can fly most of what you need and go and do a couple of shows in New Zealand. Back in the old days, we obviously had to take everything from Australia and New Zealand, which made it tough. But the production in both countries now is world class. And the other thing is that if you go around the world and you go and see a few international acts, you can bet your life the lighting designer or the sound engineer or the stage roadie are Australians. We import a huge amount of crew. We're very good at it.
Yeah, I noticed that we see a lot of them on the road.
Yeah.
It just got to become cost of doing business when you're dealing with international artists is the expense of traveling gear and traveling production that most other countries don't have to deal with. But you're an island, essentially.
Yeah, well, it's like when we did Dolly Parton a few years ago, she actually wanted to use her 2 American tour buses, not so much to travel in, but everything that she needs to perform and maintain is all in those buses. So we basically had to get the National Ministry of Transport change the road laws because the buses, a bit wide here, a bit too heavy there, because each state has basically its own transport laws. So that was a minefield. It took us months to sort it out, and we got it sorted.
Going all the way to the top to make a show happen.
Yeah, well, you have to sometimes. But there are so many tours going through Australia. There's nothing for us 4 weeks ago to have had 5 or 6 shows in one city in one night, ranging from 200 seaters to 15,000 people at Laneway.
I'm Amy Morrison. I work at Concerts West, AEG Presents, and I'm on Promoter 101.
Tweets of the week.
I hope you're ready because it's Thursday, and that means it's time for Tweets of the Week. Let's start here. When an agency hounds you for a deposit they already have in their trust account.
You guys need to figure out how to track my money better. That's my money, and I don't like it when you fuck around with my money.
When an agent tries to use reverse psychology.
I love this. That shit never works.
When a venue manager calls with his own personal notes for the artist's show content.
Yeah, let's leave the artistic part to the, artists.
That's right. That'll just about do it for Tweets of the Week. Make sure you follow Dan on Twitter. He is @TheJew.
This is Andrea Johnson from ICM Partners, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
In our featured interview this week, we're joined again by Triple Eight's management and co-founder George Couri as we continue the Nashville sessions.
George Couri from Triple Eight Management. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
You manage a wealth of artists, and unlike many managers where you focus on one genre of music, you have really worked in a multitude of formats.
Yes, we started having most of our success in country music, and then it expanded from there into rock. And we aren't intentionally trying to be in multiple genres, but when you see an act that you feel excited about and you feel like you have the plan and a path to guide them to success, well, then we get involved. And I give a lot of credit for that to Bruce Kalmick, my partner, because he had a greater desire to go chase some of that down and figure it out. And we were having so much success in country that I kept pushing on the country side. And he was carving out more time in his life to go look at the non-country stuff. And now we're kind of just crisscrossing a few different places, and it's fun.
As a management company, you guys are constantly thinking outside the box. You've gotten involved with a record label now?
Correct. It started with, we had been putting out a number of records ourselves because obviously some artists are on indie labels, some artists are on major labels, and some artists are self-released. And being self-released, you end up having to learn a lot of how to turn all the knobs to connect the dots with controlling the master. And from that, we moved a lot of records, not necessarily millions, but we moved a couple million in the aggregate across a number of different acts who just needed to be self-released for one reason or another, that had, multi-million-dollar touring businesses and didn't feel like they needed to give up the control or a piece of the pie to another label, or didn't have that option. So we would just try to solve that option. So over time, we began to do more, specifically with 30 Tigers. 30 Tigers obviously is a very successful distribution company. They serve a lot of the record label functions, but not all of them. And a lot of their model is, if they believe in a project and they believed in a lot of ours, they would give us money to go market the records. And we would have to go buy all the advertising and do all that stuff. They would help us in certain areas. But essentially, we as the management company had to function as a label for a lot of those acts. And a lot of those made money with 30 Tigers. 30 Tigers, of course, were the first people involved in Luke Combs, Jason Isbell, Sturgill, and many others. So as we were doing records with them, we were realizing that there was a good partnership with David Macias. Eventually, we even had a record with Chase Rice sell, right now it's at 970,000 albums, and it's never had a typical label home. We would partner with different people along the way to grow that record, but David kept giving us money. We kept earning it back. So we kept building Chase's career that way.
So the albums are going to go platinum at some point because he's in a touring cycle and back catalog always sells.
And his current album just had his first number one radio single ever. So the exposure is at a greater level. So the old catalog is selling, and that's going to be platinum soon, which will be 30 Tigers' first platinum record ever.
That's pretty awesome, man.
And those checks just kind of keep rolling our way. We were serving the needs of those artists. We weren't taking master ownership. So we were doing that for a lot of artists with 30 Tigers. And then David Macias has really great ears. And like I said, was early on in terms of, say, the mainstream country artists. He was early and had Luke Combs, Old Dominion, Chase Rice, many others. And he loses them to majors because they get to a point where they want to pull the trigger on a mainstream country radio effort. But he wasn't built for it. Also, although he gives them money, he doesn't tie them up to where they can't go do a deal. I mean, he's one of the most ethical people we know. So
it's very un-music industry.
Exactly. So he called and said, I'm tired of losing these people to the majors when we could solve this, and I want to do it with you guys. So we said, okay. But first, no, we don't want to have a label. But then it was, well, if we could do it with a great promotion team that can compete with anyone and all the money we would need to do it, okay, and only have to sign maybe one or two things, great. But no one's going to go for that. And he said, well, I think I can figure that out, because his distribution partner was Sony. And he went and, David's brilliant, and he convinced them to do it. So then he called back and said, they're in. Doing it the way you guys want to do it. We'll just sign one thing. We'll build a whole team. So then it was kind of like, wow, we got all the things we didn't think we would get. So, okay, let's try it. And then immediately we started to build out how we would do it.
It's kind of funny because if you walked into a bar in Nashville and discover some artist, you can sign them to a record deal, sign them to a management deal, get them on tour, and really you can discover an artist and have the ability to give them all the resources they would need to break.
Yes, I'd like to think we can. We've built the management company, though, to a point where we have label partners on most of the roster artists, but we also have 12 people in marketing just in the management company. We have a creative director. We have a radio promotion person. We have a few other tools so that we can do that without a label in order to build them to the point where there's enough momentum where a label deal is attractive and you become a bigger priority at the label right away. So we're using a lot of that team to help assist the new country label's efforts. So the country label is, of course, Norbert Nix is country radio promotion executive of the last few decades that we had a lot of success with Chase on. He's the GM running it every day. So 30 Tigers helps, Triple Eight helps, but we were able to apply some of that management staff to solve some of the marketing problems, for example.
Using the best resources, putting your best foot forward.
Right. So there's 8 people who are full-time doing nothing but that record label. But then there's another 8 or 9 people who aren't on the P&L of the record company, but are daily contributing to it.
We should talk about the management side. That's obviously the label's a cool thing, but let's start in the middle.
Where do you want to start?
I want to start where you and me actually met. Brian Hill put us together on Eli Young Band, and we were doing a handful of dates together. Clearly wasn't the start of your career, but it was where I came into it. So let's start there, and then we'll go backwards. So Brian was at Paradigm at the time.
Correct.
I think you guys were in your maybe 3rd single at the moment.
That sounds right.
Already been on maybe the Kenny Chesney tour, and you guys were doing headline dates in between, and just kind of figuring out where it was going. And there's a million country acts in the world. There's a billion people that want to play country. But actually breaking radio with that first single and getting any kind of recognition and breaking through the white noise is next to impossible. How do you do that?
Well, it's different every time, I think. I mean, some cases, sure, the most common thought is that, oh, well, you put together some great songs and you go get a record deal and they put you on a radio tour and they have an ad date and boom, it's a hit. But that seems, to us at least, like kind of a lower probability of success. In Eli Young's case, for example, it was probably to the mainstream business, it felt like, oh, boom, there's a song, Crazy Girl, and off they went. But really it was, you go back a couple records and there was, first of all, there was probably 1,000 tickets a night happening in 15 markets, no label. And then there was a song that was starting to connect in 20 markets on the radio. And then there was another song after that on the following album that kind of grazed the top 10. And each single, each album project, they'd reach a little further out. They'd get more people on board. They'd sell a few more tickets in places they haven't been. So that by the time we got to Crazy Girl being #1 song, it wins Song of the Year at ACMs and all that, it was really like 3 steps that each song, each album got them a little further into the mainstream. So that by the time we got to the one that really popped.
So you're just kind of building on the last thing's shoulders.
Exactly. As opposed to brand new band or artist out of nowhere. Song connects. Everybody loves it. It's a hit. Good job, record company. I mean, still, Republic, Big Machine, Scott Borchetta had a lot to do with Crazy Girl for sure, but it wasn't a brand new thing at that point. There were champions in a lot of pockets, and each year or so there'd be more champions.
Now, Eli Young has had a really good run and career, and clearly it's far from over. But only 1 tool in your toolbox, and there are many when you're talking about your artists. I think my favorite is Wheeler Walker Jr. It shows that you have a sense of humor above all other things. Can you maybe explain Wheeler Walker Jr. to the people that haven't been lucky enough to wind up discovering this artist yet?
Of course. If you like classic country and the sonically, I'm speaking here in terms of Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings era, but you're not afraid to have a little humor and maybe raunchy subjects in there, I mean, this is for you.
I mean, it's like Andrew Dice Clay met Waylon Jennings or something.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, like, for those of you who know Dave Cobb, he makes pretty strong records. For Wheeler, he got hooked up with Dave Cobb through Sturgill. Sturgill was a big fan of what Wheeler was doing.
That makes a lot of sense.
He introduces him to Dave Cobb. Dave Cobb helps make sonically a crazy good record. And they are really, really catchy songs that it's hard to not sing along to. And they're really, really like shockingly dirty at times.
They're funny. You got to have a sense of humor about it.
But they're funny. And Wheeler himself, when he takes to sharing his thoughts and opinions of whatever is happening in music or in the world, is really, really good and really funny. And the combo built an audience.
I mean, Kid Rock took him out last year.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it'd be pretty hard to offend a Kid Rock audience. I think they're the exact audience that would get the joke.
I went to the first show in Seattle, and I walked through the lawn all around the venue while he was playing. I would say there's three groups of people. Those who were singing along, and they already knew who he was. Those who were shocked at what they were hearing and couldn't decide if they liked it or not. And those who were just trying to cover their kids' ears and didn't want anything to do with it. But that's Wheeler. I mean, it's polarizing.
Seems very much like the Book of Mormon when I saw that at the Broadway house.
Right. But yeah, no, he's built a really good business, essentially just being himself and sharing his opinion and so forth. And he's another one where he doesn't have a label. We do all the label functions, and even still without radio, because it's too dirty to play on radio, and even really without any streaming support or anything else, he's bringing down a pretty healthy check just from ownership of the masters every month. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's making music people like, they're telling their friends, and he's an unedited opinion in a world where people are usually pretty reserved and trying to not offend too many people, and he's the opposite.
There's one common theme between all of your and Bruce's acts. The live show is always phenomenal. Everything you guys work with, I know the band is going to bring it live.
Yeah, obviously we can't, guarantee unbelievable shows every single night for every single act, but we try to work with people that we know we can develop their touring based on the fact that they have a very high caliber show on a regular basis, because then we have something to work with. Because as much radio success as there have been, as many, successful albums there have been, all of that really is tools to promote the live show. And then if all of that work goes in and then the live show can't convince people to have a good time and tell their friends about it next time, then we feel like that's not really the best artist to bet on.
Right, so since we started in the middle, let's go back to the beginning.
Sure.
How'd you find your way to music?
I was very stubborn in telling my parents I was leaving college and going to LA, and I'm going to get into music one way or another.
You dropped out of college?
Yep. I did 1 year. And I didn't get motivated by anything that was happening in school, or felt like, I'm excited to be an engineer or a doctor or accountant or whatever. None of that was motivating me at all. And I just kept thinking about music, and I had an aunt that lived in Hollywood, so I knew I could have a place to land and try to figure it out. So I landed there and I went and figured it out.
Where'd you go to college the first year?
Marshall.
We are.
Yes. My mom was a senior at Marshall the year the plane crash happened.
Oh, wow.
And so she told me about the school. Go check it out. I went and checked it out. I'm like, fine, let's do this. Clearly, I wasn't really that motivated to go to school.
So how long were you in LA?
6 years. Waited tables, worked in hotels. Eventually, I had a friend of a friend that knew someone at USC Film School. USC Film School producer of one of the master's thesis programs knew that I had a keyboard and liked to make music in my room for myself, and said, hey, I need some music for this student film. And I said, okay. Here, gave them a little music. They were like, oh. And they told their friends, and that led to like 10 of those. After doing about 10 of those, it led to someone who knew someone who needed an intern at a record company. So I went and tried that out, and that led to a gig in a management company, paying almost nothing, but I did it. And then I realized, oh, I like this.
So which management company?
It's a guy named Tim Neese Management. He had Hornsby. He had Ricky Lee Jones at one point, Archangels, Charlie Sexton, things like that.
It's a very AAA, middle of the road.
The Posies. And the Posies were the ones, they were on Geffen at the same time that Nirvana got signed by the same people and all that. And they were nice to me. And I think I credit to this day that I'm still doing this because they were nice to me. And I said, oh, this is fun. Like, I could do this. and then eventually left there and started doing my own thing and kept going.
When you sign an act, you sign it for the world?
Yes.
So working internationally has got to pose some interesting challenges. A lot of managers just sign for North America. So working throughout the world, different times, different agencies, different promoters, different languages. How do you work through those challenges?
Probably the same as anyone else. Make time in the schedule to connect with people, whatever time it happens to be for you. I give Bruce a lot of credit for actually traveling over to UK and Europe a lot, being our champion over there. So whatever, act we may be setting up over there or trying to grow, everybody on the team will kind of gather around and figure out, well, how do we crack this nut? And it's not just me. It's not just Bruce. There's a lot of folks who are chipping in to figure out how to get the dots connected for any given act over there. But it all comes down to managing your time. Like all of us, you're busy, I'm busy. Like we just got to fit it in.
How do you know where to spend your resources as a manager of what country you're going to try and break next? And once you get done with America and Canada and maybe Australia, like where do you line up?
The UK is first for a country. And then from there are some spots to hit. Germany, a little bit of Spain. But I think people typically try to get a foothold for country artists in the UK first. And obviously C2C, there's a couple times a year where a lot of bands go over and do things. They just launched their first national country-only radio station over there.
You got to love that, where at one point you only had a certain sector of the world population listening to your artist, and now the entire world can be opened up to it, not only by just the internet, but the fact that radio is being turned on to it, and TV with the help of things like CMT. Like there are avenues now to distribute worldwide.
Correct. It's still early in the UK, but I think that now that a lot of artists are going over to the UK and having success and selling thousands of tickets a night where they couldn't before, and there's a lot of effort and media attention starting to roll on country artists in the UK, I think that will become a model for other territories who will see that happening, and then people will want to make money from it, and they'll try to replicate it in other countries, and it will just keep growing.
So what is the goal for AAA right now? What are you guys looking forward to or working towards?
We are looking to just get better at serving every possible need that we can come up with for an artist. Like, we don't like to go rely on too many other people to solve problems. So we have a creative director because we want someone that can make content better and faster. Could be shooting a video, could be coming up with a logo, graphic design, whatever. Like, we brought that in because we want to move faster. Radio promotion, more marketing people, so we can just get things done and get things out into the marketplace. And if a label's on board, great, we'll partner with them and we'll speed it up even faster. But right now it's how do we get 40 people within 888 working together better all the time and prevent it from siloing? Because it's easy to let it silo. Everyone just works on their own thing and that's it. But, we have an inner leadership team of myself, Bruce, Paul Steele, Jesse Atwell, who are working with chunks of the company on a daily basis more. And then we get together and figure out, where are we weak? Where are we strong? How do we make it better? And getting 40 people to work in tandem where no one competes with anybody else inside the company for artists, for resources, or for opportunities. That's tricky at that size.
Yeah, to act like a nimble, small company when you're not so small anymore has got to be a challenge.
Exactly. So it's because it's easy to get wrapped up in your inbox and your phone call list and not go do those things. But we have to carve out time to do it so that we are operating as a unit and not operating as 6 different entities within one banner, which we don't want.
So before I let you go, just on the industry tip, what should people be paying attention to that you guys are really excited about for the next couple of years?
Well, you touched on Eli Young and Chase both having big hits right now, and the momentum that will create from
Kaleo.
Exactly. So Kaleo's coming, new music this fall, album beginning of the year. Judah and the Lion just put out an album and are rolling bigger than they have ever at this point, and it's continuing to build. Scotty McCreary's never had a top 5 single before and now posted back-to-back number ones and is selling 2,500 tickets a night, where 18 months ago he was selling 800 tickets a night. Whiskey Myers is one of those that are labelless, but selling tickets, selling records. I think people will be surprised by what their first week actual sales and streams, but even just sales, are going to be, and they're out there doing 1,800, 2,000 tickets, and no label, no radio, no nothing. And it's been a fast growing arc for them in the last 12 months alone.
I tell you, I was at Osheaga a couple of years ago hanging out with Kaleo, and it's hot, sweltering today. The guys just came off stage and they killed it. And they were all kind of taking their shirts off and wiping the sweats from their brows. And we were walking past some girls backstage. And I don't think since the Beatles at Shea have I seen something be Spanish Fly to women the way that the lead singer of Kaleo just girls trampled us to get to them.
We're going to use that in the marketing. Steiny says, not since the Beatles at Shea.
Not since the Beatles at
Kaleo. Got it.
And he's an Abercrombie and Fitch ad walking. It's insane.
He is an individual of tremendous willpower. Fitness, diet, songwriting, studio work. He's just so focused on all of it and doesn't waver. And that's why he has the music he has, he writes the songs he has, and looks the way he looks. I mean, he's strict about it all. It's impressive.
Not since the Beatles at Shea. There's the one.
That's a great line.
I want to thank you so much for making time and talking to us on Promoter 101.
I was very happy to be asked. Thank you.
George is a class act. Mwah!
Hello there, Andy Summers from APA and Promoter 101. Happy to be here.
Hey, episode 171 of Promoter 101 in the can. We appreciate you for tuning in, and we have to give a big thanks to both of our wonderful guests this week from Like This, Jim Frayling, and from 888 Management, George Couri. Thank you both for coming on the podcast, giving some time and wisdom to the folks out there. If you like what you heard, hit us at Steiny at Promoter101.net. Feel free to tell us what's on your mind.
Hey, we'll be back Monday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. on the Eastern Seaboard.
Join us Monday. We're going to be featuring Belgium's Gracia Live's Sam Pearl in the podcast. Looking forward to it.
Until then, we're wishing you sold-out shows for the week to come. Cheers!
Call your mother.
I'm Ashley Capps, founder and CEO of AC Entertainment, and I'm on Promoter 101.